What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Creator Coffee Hour. I'm your host, Sulmood, and this week we have a continuation of my conversation with Matt Black from Atomic.Finance. However, what's different this time around is we deep dive specifically into Bitcoin, why Bitcoin is important, Bitcoin's adoption curve and why you should be paying attention to it, the difference between Bitcoin on exchanges versus Bitcoin in a hard wallet, where to learn more about the cryptocurrency environment, and what exactly the future holds for Bitcoin as an asset. These are all topics that are super relevant in today's world, as well as into the future, and I think you will all really enjoy this conversation. If you've been enjoying the episode so far, please leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts and hit that follow button if you're listening on Spotify. If you haven't already, subscribe to our direct feed on Substack to receive our episodes before anyone else through the link in our Instagram bio. We talk a lot today about investing, so I just have to stress that all opinions expressed are solely our individual opinions. You should not treat any opinion expressed by either myself or Matt as a specific inducement to make a particular investment. This podcast is provided for general informational purposes only and does not constitute financial or investment advice. Anyways, enjoy the show. Obviously, as someone who's kind of, I would say an expert in this, obviously in the industry, if you had to speak to the average 22-year-old or, the average university student on the importance of Bitcoin, how would you kind of pitch it to them in a minute or less?
Oh man, yeah, I did this on another podcast, and I was supposed to pitch it to my grandma, I think, and then I did a bad job, but I'll see if I can do better this time. I think that Bitcoin is freedom money. So what that means is it's digital gold, right? So we had if you ever want a way to be able to store your wealth in a way that can't be taken from you, that you have full control of, Bitcoin is for you. If you want to hedge against the existing financial system and the government's printing money like no tomorrow, if you believe that the government can fuck up and can mess up like they did in 2008 and that's going to happen again, Bitcoin is for you. Because I think at the end of the day, there's 21 million Bitcoin. There's not enough for every millionaire to have one. This is the ultimate savings account. If we look at Bitcoin over the last several years, it's easily 10x to 100x multiple times, but because the entire world has not bought into Bitcoin yet. And so I think if we're looking at what the future of finance looks like, the future of finance is Bitcoin. What do you think people are going to be using in 30 years? Are they going to be using our old existing financial system, or are they going to be using a new and fast and great one like Bitcoin? And so I think if you want to preserve your wealth, if you want to protect yourself against inflation, I think Bitcoin is a perfect thing, for you. And I'm actually curious. So you've watched Pomp, and you kind of heard my explanation to a 22-year-old. I'm curious to hear what is your view for someone who's I wouldn't call you a normie. I'd say you're a little bit further deep because you do listen to Pomp. I'm curious to hear what your pitch would be.
I wouldn't necessarily say I have a pitch. I think I've already tried. I've talked to a lot of my friends. I'm like, you guys should add a little bit of crypto, but specifically Bitcoin to your portfolio. I feel like, especially for people who, because a lot of my friends are in finance or accounting, for a lot of people that are working in the current financial industry, they are naturally a bit skeptical of Bitcoin. And I think the biggest thing is the volatility and the use case that they see for it. But for me, for Bitcoin as an asset, I think a lot of what you said is totally true. But I also think it is the perfect hedge to the current financial system. And I think it's way better than gold in terms of looking at its future use case and how much more future oriented it is and what the possibilities could be. One Bitcoin's worth 45 grand, USD, I think on Friday, it might've been. We've seen it was very volatile over the last few months, going all the way up to 60 grand. But I think the value of that, as people understand the use case and understand how it works more and more, and I guess this is kind of might be mean to say, but as the old guard kind of in the financial industry kind of moves out, I think the use case and the use of Bitcoin will only increase as people like you continue to grow and become the ones that are outspoken about the financial industry. So that's why I'm very bullish on it, and I think like if you're gonna put money anywhere and just let it sit, if you have money in an S&P 500 index fund, then I don't see why you wouldn't just put a portion of your money into Bitcoin as well.
It's the only it's a perfectly uncorrelated asset as well. So if you think that things could go to shit, a Bitcoin is the perfect hedge against that. And also I think I would say as well, like companies are starting to do this to hedge. MicroStrategy, how many $1 billion? I think they put $1 billion in. It's worth $2 billion now. Elon Musk, put a percentage of the treasury of Tesla into Bitcoin. So like, if you don't have Bitcoin, I think you should be asking yourself, like, what do you know that Elon Musk doesn't know? It's so I think we're getting in the age of like, corporations buying, and when that happens, I think it's going to be a lot harder to get in. And so, yeah, I think people need to have another look at it.
And then we've kind of talked about it before, but I think one thing that I want to tune into so that people understand is kind of the difference between having like Bitcoin through a custodian, so whether it be through like Binance or Coinbase, the difference between that and then actually owning Bitcoin on a hard wallet and what the implications might be. Speaking to maybe like Quadriga, like that whole scandal and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know like a lot of and many people like listening might have been affected by Quadriga. Like the situation is that there's two types of Bitcoin. There is a Bitcoin IOU, and then there's Bitcoin. So a Bitcoin IOU is, you buy it on an exchange. It sits in the exchange. It's in the exchange's wallet. And that's what happened with Quadriga is, people deposited money in there. The founder, died in India. They don't know like yeah, exactly. Yeah, the founders were actually, I was at a dinner, actually a Bitcoin dinner, and like one of the guys there had met the founders, and they knew the way the founders met each other because they scammed each other. So, that's
oh my gosh, that's a hell of a founder story.
Yeah. So that's Quadriga for you. But like at the end of the day, like if you've got your money in an exchange, there's nothing protecting you. If they disappear, like there's no do-overs. There's no way to get that Bitcoin back. Like Mt. Gox, like billions of dollars now of like Bitcoin were like lost in the Mt. Gox hack. Quadriga, people lost millions upon millions of dollars because they had their money like sitting in Quadriga. So if you want to really like be able to protect if you're buying Bitcoin, you want to be able to protect your wealth. I always recommend, getting a hardware wallet. So there's this really good guide online. It's called like bitcoinsecurity.guide. And what it goes over is like the process of being able to like custody Bitcoin yourself. So usually what you buy is it's a little device. It's called a hardware wallet. It means that the private key that's associated with your Bitcoin is held on that wallet. So that's the key to be able to access your Bitcoin. It's not on the computer. It can't be hacked. And that just allows you to spend your Bitcoin and have peace of mind. Then doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter if this company goes down, that company goes down, anyone goes down, you've still got your Bitcoin. And that's for, I think for a lot of Bitcoiners, that's like the really great peace of mind that it brings. Bitcoin IOU, it's an IOU, it's OTU. They're not necessarily going to give you that Bitcoin when shit hits the fan. Real Bitcoin, it's always yours.
And one thing I've also heard is like sometimes you don't know, like, is there really Bitcoin behind the scenes that they're holding for you? Like the Bitcoin that you've said that you bought, is that really there?
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about, Bitcoin's unique properties. A Bitcoin IOU doesn't necessarily have that, right? So we'll put that in the show notes if anyone is interested. Again, I think crypto as a whole, the information is really fragmented. And one thing that I listened to a podcast the other day, and it's like when any information about learning about crypto or learning about Bitcoin is put onto the internet, once it's published, it's already outdated because the industry is like evolving so friggin' quickly, right? If I want to learn more, who should I be listening to? What should I be reading?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've you've been kind of watching the right content, right? Watching Pomp. He has a great podcast, and he's I think he's a really great guy for bringing someone into the industry that maybe isn't isn't reading white papers, isn't like writing cryptography on a daily basis, like someone who's just like, hey, I'm interested in Bitcoin, what is it? He can kind of introduce you to it and show you the ropes and show you why Bitcoin is important. I think like at some point a lot of people go down the rabbit hole, and that's where like there's a lot more podcasts actually. So actually, I think two things. Pomp has a great podcast, and also I've heard Stephen Livera. I've heard he is a really great podcast as well. I haven't actually watched it myself, but I've been meaning to. And then of course there's podcasts that are much further down the rabbit hole. That and they're like the real Bitcoiners that will talk to you about why you need your own hardware wallet, how to secure your Bitcoin, all this other stuff. And that's really on like Marty Bent's podcast, like Tales from the Crypt. I think he does a really great job getting into that. And the other place as well that more recently is actually Clubhouse. There's a lot of like different like Clubhouse rooms that are like Bitcoin focused, and it's really great in there because people ask like really like rudimentary questions, and you can just like if you're new to Bitcoin, like you can go out there and you can ask like the simple questions to these Bitcoiners and learn like all the things that you want to learn or you always had questions about. I think it's a really great opportunity. Yeah.
Your Bitcoin endgame, like what do you kind of see 30 years down the line? Because I've heard different takes, and that's again where a lot of people criticize Bitcoin because of the volatility, like whether it can be that long-term asset that just sits in the central bank kind of thing. People criticize it because of the volatility that it does bring. So I was kind of curious, like what do you kind of see it? Do you see it as an asset? Do you see it as a tool, or both? Or where do you kind of see it as in our financial industry?
Yeah, so I think there's actually like we talked about this all the time. Like there's two ways that this can go. One is I think regardless, like Bitcoin is going to become like the world reserve currency. It will like what gold did in the early 1900s. Bitcoin will do for the the 21st century. And I think it will be the asset that that will be utilized whether it's by and really, I think there's two ways that this can go. Like one is that it's the one that's it's the currency that's used by banks. Bitcoin is held with custodians. Countries have like large reserves of Bitcoin, but the average person doesn't, right? And so it basically just becomes the new gold, and it becomes a Bitcoin walled garden where if you want to buy Bitcoin, it's like it's just as difficult as buying gold. It's held in large custodians. Everyone who buys Bitcoin, and it just exists at an exchange or something. So I think that's one version, and that's that's a very dark version in my opinion. And it's a little bit better than gold because you can actually prove like how much Bitcoin there is, and you can prove scarcity. But it really doesn't like achieve all the things that we sought out to do with Bitcoin. The other version is in my opinion a lot brighter, which is a future where like of like self custody. So everyone like kind of goes and they custody their own Bitcoin. And how this is going to look, I think, is a little bit unclear. And part of the reason for that is because like the scalability of Bitcoin. So there's 7 billion people on Earth. About like 3,000 transactions can be created every 10 minutes on Bitcoin. That means like a person can create a transaction on Bitcoin every 3 decades. That is like incredibly not scalable. But I think there's a lot of like technical solutions that can allow that to be the case. But I think at the end of the day, if people aren't custodying Bitcoin themselves and aren't using financial tools that that like they have control of, then like we've failed as an industry to like really bring like the great benefits of Bitcoin like to your average person. And all we've done is taking this great technology and we've like centralized it. So I think that's really what I see is that over time, like it's either going to be a Bitcoin walled garden, or it's going to be like a nice and open future where like everyone's able to like do things with Bitcoin themselves. I think long term as well, like big Bitcoin whales that hold a lot of Bitcoin today, actually in the future, like eventually you're going to have an adoption curve, right? So it's you're going to have a massive growth of Bitcoin, and then it's going to level off, and eventually like Bitcoin is not going to be as volatile as it is today. Like you're gonna like when Bitcoin hits $500,000, it's like on par with like the market cap of gold, but I don't think that's like the upper limit to Bitcoin. I think it's going to go much higher than that. But it's just a situation of like the volatility will decrease as there is more capital in it. So today, like don't worry about the volatility in Bitcoin. When Bitcoin's worth like $1 million or $5 million, like it going from like 50K to 25K, that's not going to matter to you, So like we're going to have an adoption curve. It's going to get like not volatile. By the time it gets it's not volatile anymore, the opportunity's gone.
So to your average person, someone our age, so do you think everyone should have a position in Bitcoin?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, this is not financial advice, but I think like even if you're just in it for the person the purpose of diversification, like if you're invested in stocks, like you should have like a small portion of your net worth in Bitcoin, even if it's like 1% or 2%. Like you should have like a little bit of Bitcoin on hand, because um like even if you think there's like a like and just put in as much as like what you think like the chances of Bitcoin like being successful. Like if you think there's a 1% chance of Bitcoin becoming like the world reserve currency, then you should have 1% of your assets in Bitcoin. If you think it's 2%, then you have 2%. I mean, Bitcoiners, they think it's 100%. So that's that's why they're all in. So that's kind of what I would recommend.
And then I think I know what your answer is going to be to this, but we're seeing, especially in Canada, I think our first Bitcoin ETF was approved like a couple of weeks ago. It's the most custodial I say you could be, an ETF, right? So I think I know what your answer is going to be, but yeah, what's your opinion on them?
So I think the real, like, obviously, like a Bitcoin ETF, it's just like custodial Bitcoin at the end of the day. I think the real person of the real like purpose of the Bitcoin ETF is actually for like your TFSA, right? So if you see yourself like buying Bitcoin and then like selling at the high and then buying back in at the low, etc., then like you're not really in it for like the long game anyway. Like you're really a trader, and so it's really useful for being able to have like obviously not pay taxes on the massive gains that occur like in Bitcoin. So I think that's really what the purpose of like the Bitcoin ETF is for. To be honest, I think like a lot of Bitcoin, some Bitcoiners even have gone out and like they bought the Bitcoin ETF for the purpose of having like, hey, if you have like 5-10% of your position like in Bitcoin and you have that in a Bitcoin ETF, and you just want to like sell to have a little bit of money at the high, I think that's totally fine. I would not recommend have like, obviously don't put all your net worth in like the ETF, because it's just a custodian once again at the end of the day. And it really doesn't like, it isn't in line with like like the vision of Bitcoin. But I think that's fine for I think there's a reason for it, like for if companies want to get exposure to it, like really they should just be holding it on their balance sheets, but I know that's hard right now. So I think the biggest purpose is just for like being able to put it in your TFSA and sell at the high. But if you're getting access to Bitcoin, like I would say like maybe put 5-10% in the ETF, and the rest you really should be like custodying yourself.
The one of the big things that I think has had an impact on crypto as a whole, but specifically Bitcoin, is the impact of like shit. I'll call them shit coins, or like and in like the pump and dumps that you'll see, especially the way media handles things and the way they kind of portray things, right? And it kind of affects the broader scale credibility of Bitcoin and crypto as a whole. So moving forward, what do you think can be done to kind of prevent these, quote unquote Ponzi schemes, and to kind of clear up the difference between what Bitcoin is versus what these other people are doing that's unrelated to what Bitcoin is? So I think it has a big impact.
Yeah, I think like these like like part of the reason that these Ponzi schemes can be created is because it is an open market, right? So I don't actually think there's much that can be done in terms of stopping them from being created. Like people are always going to print shit coins, and then they'll eventually realize why they're shitty and eventually move to Bitcoin. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I believe in open markets, right? Like if you're any like type of Austrian economics, you're going to believe in a free market and people being able to do what they wish. So if people wish to print shit coins, like they can do it. Obviously, like I think part of like the things that we can do and to like improve on those things is building tools for people that allows them to be able to utilize like I guess like decentralized like products without using a token. So an example of that is like most of the things that exist in like Ethereum DeFi require like a token. Like if you want to like use an Oracle, like there's a token for that. Like Compound, MakerDAO, like all these different tools that exist in Ethereum. Each of them, they all have tokens that are like really unnecessary. So I think really it's like if you want to like change that from occurring, you just need to build tools that don't include tokens, and then people if people use your tool, they won't like use your token as well. So I think that's really the only way to stop it. Like, it's just going to keep happening, and there's going to be a lot of noobs that come into the market, and they're going to get wrecked by all these shit coins, and that's just going to happen again and again, and it's unfortunate. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin has always been king and always will be king. Like, all the number 2, number 3, number 4, next 100 after that, they've all changed over the last 10 years, and that'll just continue to happen. So, I mean, if we can educate people to be focused on Bitcoin and Bitcoin only, then great. And I think that's what we should be doing. But yeah, you can't really stop the shit coins.
I actually thought of one more thing that's kind of outside of the Bitcoin crypto kind of space, because you've talked a lot about like reading other stories of other entrepreneurs. Like you talked about Jeff Bezos, Netflix, Reed Hastings, and you mentioned a few others. And you talked about reading in general, like even Tony's reading on specific topics that have helped your business. But from just a general business entrepreneurship perspective, like what is the one book you'd say, if you want to become an entrepreneur, this is the first big book that I'd say pick up, give it a read?
Oh, interesting. That's it. One book. I don't know. Like, I've read, to be honest, I've been meaning to do like more reading. Tony's been doing a lot of reading, and he's been telling me to do more reading, so I need to do that. That's one thing I need to improve for myself. I really enjoyed reading like the Everything Store by like Jeff Bezos, because it really talked about what the process for like them was like in the early days. And I think it also teaches you like not only like the difficulties of being an entrepreneur, but like the things that you need to focus on, and how they really thought about creating a business. So, starting on like a specific segment, like, Amazon, when they started, they said, hey, we're not building the Everything Store to begin with. We're just starting on books. Like, we're just going to go and we're going to like solve this one problem, and then like we can go and expand from there. So I think like reading those books teaches you like those specific things. So it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, I also enjoyed reading like Made in America by, about Sam Walton and Walmart. And that's a great book as well, where they, started on like a specific thing and expanded from there. So it doesn't, I would recommend those 2 books, but I think in general, like, reading stories about entrepreneurs and like what their process was, I think can be really helpful. And I think it's also really helpful to like read about your specific industry as well, and like learn about like the different companies and like what they did. Like, how did Coinbase start? Like, so that would be really something that would be really useful for us. Which a book hasn't been written yet, but obviously we can we can talk to people and learn kind of what the process was, or from the blog posts, etc. And so I think that's what's the most important, is find what industry you're in, and then find like stories of entrepreneurs that have gone and built things in that industry, and then you'll have a better sense of like how to tackle what you want to do.
Well, okay, great. Thanks so much, Matt. Honestly, it's been an awesome conversation. And it's honestly so cool to have someone from, Waterloo Laurier that is working in the Bitcoin crypto space. Yeah, I'm not really aware of anyone else that's working in that industry and actually creating waves and making an impact like you are. So any last words?
Any last words? Yeah, I'll read the good book. If you want to like really learn about Bitcoin, read the Bitcoin Standard. It's an awesome one. It will completely change your mind about the existing financial system. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode. If you're interested in any of the resources that Matt or I mentioned, I've included a list of the podcasts and books in this episode's show notes. We'll be back next week interviewing another founder, but I wanted to take the opportunity to deep dive into a very relevant and interesting topic, as well as share it with you all. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Creator Coffee Hour for weekly updates and some awesome content. To receive our episodes the instant they're released, subscribe to our Substack through the link in our Instagram bio, where you can subscribe directly to the email feed. Thanks again for listening. See you all next week.